Richard Matthews lies in his hospital bed, machines beeping around him, when his ex-wife, Elena, walks through the door. He hasn't seen her in 3 years, not since the divorce that made headlines across the city. She looks older now, grayer, but her eyes still hold that quiet strength that once made him feel invincible. "Elena," he whispers, his voice barely audible. "You came." She approaches slowly, her footsteps echoing in the sterile room. The nurses have left them alone, and somewhere in the hallway, his second wife, Jessica, argues with doctors about visiting hours. But Elena doesn't seem to hear any of it. She leans down close to his ear, close enough that he can smell her familiar perfume, and she whispers something that makes his eyes widen. The words are soft, almost tender, but they hit him like a physical blow. What she says next will be recorded by a nurse who accidentally left her phone on the bedside table. Within hours, those words will spread across social media, shared by millions who remember the scandal that destroyed their marriage. But to understand why those words matter, you need to know their story.
Richard Matthews built his empire from nothing, or at least that's what he tells everyone. At 52, he owns 3 luxury hotels, a chain of high-end restaurants, and a real estate portfolio worth $80 million. His penthouse overlooks the city's financial district, and his garage houses cars that cost more than most people's homes. But Richard wasn't always wealthy. 25 years ago, he was a struggling contractor with big dreams and empty pockets. He lived in a cramped apartment above a bakery, surviving on instant noodles and black coffee while he tried to land his first major construction contract. Elena was 24 then, working double shifts at a diner to pay for her nursing degree. She had thick, dark hair that she pulled back in a practical ponytail and hands that were always slightly rough from washing dishes. When Richard came in for his usual late-night coffee, she would slip him an extra piece of pie without charging him. "You need to eat," she would say, not looking for thanks or recognition, just caring. They married after dating for 6 months. Elena dropped out of nursing school to help Richard run his growing business. While he met with clients and contractors, she managed the books, answered phones, and handled payroll from their kitchen table. She worked 16-hour days without complaint, filing taxes and chasing down payments while Richard focused on the big picture. Elena never asked for credit when his first hotel opened. She stood in the back during his acceptance speech at the Chamber of Commerce, clapping quietly while he thanked his investors and his team. He didn't mention her name. As the years passed and the money grew, Richard changed. He started wearing expensive suits and driving luxury cars. He joined the country club and began attending charity galas, where he posed for photographs with other wealthy donors. Elena would stand beside him in borrowed dresses, smiling for the cameras while he discussed business deals over champagne. But Elena stayed the same. She still cooked his favorite meals, still remembered his mother's birthday, still listened when he came home stressed about negotiations or problem employees. She didn't ask for jewelry or expensive vacations. She seemed content to live simply, even as their bank account grew. Richard began to find her simplicity embarrassing. When potential investors came to dinner, he would notice Elena's plain dress, her modest jewelry, the way she talked about books instead of business. He started making excuses for her absence at important events. "Elena's not feeling well," he would tell colleagues. "She's busy with family matters." The truth was, he was ashamed of the woman who had built his empire alongside him. At social gatherings, Richard would find himself drawn to younger women who laughed at his jokes and complimented his success. Women who understood wine and art, who dressed expensively and spoke confidently about travel and culture. Women who looked like they belonged in his world. Elena noticed the changes. She saw how he avoided introducing her to new clients, how he scheduled business dinners on nights when she couldn't attend, how he stopped asking her opinion about major decisions. But she didn't fight or complain. She just grew quieter. "Do you remember when we used to talk about everything?" she asked him one evening as they sat in their living room, the television playing to an empty audience. "We still talk," he replied, not looking up from his phone. "No," Elena said softly. "We used to dream together. Now you dream alone." Richard felt a flicker of guilt, but he pushed it away. Elena was holding him back, he told himself. She didn't understand his world anymore. She belonged to his past, not his future. The distance between them grew wider. Richard started working late more often, attending conferences and business trips that stretched for weeks. He hired a personal assistant, a young woman named Jessica, who was everything Elena wasn't. Jessica was 28, blonde and polished. She understood Richard's business, spoke confidently with clients, and looked perfect at his side during corporate events. Elena watched it all happen with quiet dignity. She didn't accuse or confront. She just continued caring for their home, managing the parts of his life that Jessica couldn't handle, and loving a man who had stopped seeing her. But something in Elena's eyes began to change. The softness was still there, but underneath it, a new strength was growing. She started spending more time reading, took up painting, and enrolled in online courses about business management. She was preparing for something, though Richard was too distracted to notice. One evening, as Richard prepared for another business dinner with Jessica, Elena sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching him adjust his tie in the hallway mirror. "Richard," she said, her voice calm and clear. "I know." He froze, his hand still on his tie. For the first time in months, he really looked at his wife. Her eyes held a quiet power that made him feel suddenly small.
The charity gala at the Grand Ballroom was supposed to be Richard's moment to shine. He had donated $50,000 to the Children's Hospital, and the evening news would feature his speech about giving back to the community. Jessica stood beside him in a silver dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, her arm linked through his as photographers captured their picture. Elena wasn't supposed to be there. Richard had told her he was attending a business conference in another city, but as he finished his speech and stepped down from the podium, he saw her standing near the back of the ballroom, wearing a simple black dress and watching him with those steady eyes. His stomach dropped. Jessica noticed his sudden stillness and followed his gaze. "Who is that?" Jessica whispered. "My wife," Richard said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. Elena didn't approach them. She didn't cause a scene or confront him publicly. She simply stood there, a quiet presence that somehow commanded attention from everyone around her. Other guests began to notice her, recognizing her from old photographs in the business journals when Richard's success story was first featured. "Is that Elena Matthews?" someone whispered nearby. "I thought they were divorced." "No, they're still married, but she never comes to these events anymore." Richard felt the weight of curious stares. He had spent months crafting his public image with Jessica, and now Elena's presence threatened to unravel everything. He couldn't ignore her, but he couldn't acknowledge her either without raising questions about Jessica's role in his life. Elena solved the problem for him. She walked directly to their table, her steps measured and confident. The conversations around them died as people strained to hear what would happen next. "Hello, Richard," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "Congratulations on your donation. The Children's Hospital is lucky to have your support." "Elena?" he managed, standing awkwardly. "I didn't know you were coming." "I bought a ticket," she said simply. "I wanted to hear your speech about giving back to the community." The words were innocent enough, but something in her tone made them sound like a challenge. Richard felt exposed, as if she could see through all his carefully constructed lies. Jessica stepped forward, extending her hand with a practiced smile. "I'm Jessica, Richard's assistant." Elena looked at the offered hand for a long moment, then back at Jessica's face. "I know who you are," she said quietly. She didn't take the hand. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Other guests pretended to focus on their conversations, but Richard could feel their attention like a physical presence. This was exactly the kind of scene he had worked so hard to avoid. "Well," Jessica said, withdrawing her hand and laughing nervously, "I should check on the auction items. Excuse me." She walked away quickly, leaving Richard alone with Elena in the crowded ballroom. He felt like a teenager caught sneaking out of the house. "You don't have to do this here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Do what?" Elena asked, genuinely confused. "Make a scene, embarrass me, whatever this is." Elena tilted her head slightly, studying his face. "I'm not making a scene, Richard. I'm attending a charity event in my own city. I'm supporting a cause I believe in. I'm watching my husband give a speech about the importance of family and community." Each word hit him like a small stone. She wasn't raising her voice or making accusations, but somehow her calm presence felt more threatening than any angry confrontation. "Elena, please," he said, glancing around at the watching faces. "People are starting to talk." "Let them talk," Elena replied. "I'm not ashamed of being your wife. Are you ashamed of having one?" The question hung in the air between them. Richard felt heat rise in his cheeks, aware that their conversation was being watched and probably recorded by phones held discreetly at nearby tables. "Of course not," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Elena nodded slowly, as if she had expected that answer. "I see," she said. "Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening." She turned to leave, but Richard caught her arm. "Elena, wait." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back at his face. "Yes? We need to talk. Tomorrow. At home. I'll be there. I'm always there." She walked away, leaving Richard alone in the middle of the ballroom. The conversations around him gradually resumed, but he could feel the whispers following him for the rest of the evening. Several people approached him with careful questions about Elena, and he found himself stammering explanations that satisfied no one. Jessica returned to his side, but the easy confidence she had shown earlier was gone. She seemed nervous, uncertain of her place in a world where Elena existed. "Who was that woman?" someone asked during the auction. "That's Elena Matthews. She's the one who built his empire with him before he started bringing the assistant to these events." Richard felt his carefully constructed world beginning to crack. Elena had done nothing dramatic, nothing that could be criticized or condemned. She had simply shown up and existed. And somehow that was enough to change everything. The next morning, Richard arrives home to find Elena sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and a stack of papers. She looks calm, almost peaceful, but there's something final about her posture that makes his chest tighten. "I made your coffee," she says without looking up. "Black, no sugar, the way you've drunk it for 25 years. Richard sits across from her, suddenly aware of how rarely they share breakfast anymore. The kitchen feels smaller than he remembers, intimate in a way that makes him uncomfortable. "Elena, about last night, I'm leaving," she says simply, cutting him off. "I filed for divorce." The words hit him like cold water. He had expected anger, tears, accusations. He had prepared explanations and justifications. But Elena's calm certainty leaves him with nothing to say. "You can't be serious," he finally manages. "I'm completely serious." She slides the papers across the table. "I've asked for very little. Half the house, a small monthly payment, and my car. You can keep the businesses, the investments, everything else." Richard stares at the documents, his mind racing. "Elena, we can work this out. Last night was a misunderstanding. Jessica Jessica is the woman you love. Or at least the woman you want to love. I've known for months. That's not true. Richard, please don't lie to me. Not now. Her voice is still gentle, but there's steel underneath it. I've watched you change. I've seen how you look at her, how you light up when she enters a room. I've seen how you've stopped looking at me. Richard feels his world tilting. This isn't how he planned for things to happen. He had imagined gradually transitioning away from Elena, maybe suggesting they grow apart naturally, maybe even convincing her that divorce was her idea. I never meant for this to happen, he says. And he realizes it's true. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Every day for the past year, you've hurt me. Not by loving someone else, but by pretending you still loved me. She stands and moves to the window, looking out at the garden she planted when they first moved into the house. The roses are blooming, red and full, just like she always liked them. Do you remember when we used to sit on that bench? She asks, pointing to a small wooden seat under the oak tree. We would drink our coffee and plan our future. You wanted to own a hotel, and I wanted to be a nurse. We were going to see the world together. We can still do that, Richard says desperately. We can travel, take time off, rediscover what we had. Elena turns back to him, and for the first time, her eyes are wet with tears. Richard, I don't think you understand. I'm not trying to win you back. I'm trying to let you go. The words break something inside him. He had expected her to fight for their marriage, to make demands and issue ultimatums. But she's offering him his freedom, and somehow that feels worse than any punishment. I don't want you to let me go, he says, his voice cracking. Yes, you do, Elena says softly. You've been trying to let me go for months. You just didn't know how to do it without looking like the bad guy. She walks back to the table and picks up her purse. I'm staying at my sister's house while the divorce goes through. You can have Jessica over now without having to sneak around. Elena, please. I loved you, Richard. I loved the man you were and the man you became. But I won't keep loving a man who's ashamed of me. She moves toward the door, then stops. The papers are fair. Sign them, and we can both move on. What if I don't sign them? Elena looks at him with something that might be pity. Then you'll be dragging out something that's already over, and I think you've caused enough pain for both of us. She leaves quietly, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Richard sits alone in the kitchen, staring at the divorce papers and the 2 cups of coffee growing cold on the table. Within hours, news of the divorce filing spreads through their social circle. The story reaches the local business journal by evening, complete with speculation about Jessica's role in the breakup. Richard's phone rings constantly with calls from friends, colleagues, and reporters wanting statements. But the call that destroys him comes from his mother. I'm disappointed in you, Richard, she says, her voice heavy with sadness. Elena was the best thing that ever happened to you, and you threw her away for what? A younger woman? I raised you better than that. The next weeks blur together. Richard throws himself into his relationship with Jessica, taking her to expensive restaurants and weekend getaways. He buys her jewelry and clothes, treats her like a queen. But every success feels hollow. Every achievement feels incomplete. Elena disappears completely from his life. She doesn't attend their usual social events, doesn't respond to his calls or texts. It's as if she has erased herself from his world, leaving only the memory of what they once had. The divorce is finalized on a Tuesday morning in October. Richard signs the papers in his lawyer's office, and Elena signs them an hour later at her sister's house. They don't see each other during the process. That night, Richard sits in his empty house,
holding a photograph of their wedding day. Elena looks so young, so full of hope and love. He realizes he hasn't felt that kind of joy in years.
6 months after the divorce, Richard's life looks perfect from the outside. He marries Jessica in a lavish ceremony that makes the society pages, and they honeymoon in Europe for 3 weeks. His businesses continue to thrive, and he's invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship and success. But Richard feels empty. Jessica is beautiful, intelligent, and charming, but conversations with her feel hollow. She talks about fashion and travel, about the latest restaurants and cultural events, but she doesn't ask him about his dreams or fears the way Yelena used to. When Richard struggles with difficult business decisions, Jessica offers practical advice, but no emotional support. When he mentions missing his father, who died 2 years earlier, Jessica suggests therapy and changes the subject. She loves the lifestyle he provides, but she doesn't seem to love him. The realization hits him one evening as they prepare for another charity gala. Jessica models 3 different dresses, asking his opinion about each one, but he finds himself thinking about Yelena's simple black dress and how elegant she looked in it. "You're not listening," Jessica says, her voice sharp with irritation. "I'm sorry," Richard says, refocusing on her. "The blue one is beautiful. I was asking about the red one." "The red one is beautiful too." Jessica stops and looks at him closely. "What's wrong with you lately? You're distracted all the time." Richard wants to tell her that he's been thinking about Yelena, wondering how she's doing, missing the way she used to know what he was thinking before he said it. But Jessica wouldn't understand. "I'm fine," he says. "Just tired." "Maybe you should see a doctor," Jessica suggests, already turning back to the mirror. "You're only 53. You shouldn't be this tired." Richard realizes that Yelena would have made him tea and sat with him until he felt better. She would have known that he wasn't physically tired, just emotionally exhausted. He starts driving past Yelena's sister's house, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. He never stops, never approaches, but seeing her car in the driveway makes him feel connected to her somehow. One day, the car is gone, and he learns from mutual friends that Yelena has moved to a different city. The news hits him harder than expected. Yelena has left not just their marriage, but their entire world. She's starting over somewhere new, and he realizes she's probably happier without him. Richard's relationship with Jessica begins to deteriorate. She wants constant attention and expensive gifts, but she gives nothing back emotionally. When he tries to talk about missing Yelena, Jessica becomes angry and accuses him of not being over his ex-wife. "You married me," she says during one heated argument. "You chose me. So why do you keep thinking about her?" "Because she was my best friend," Richard admits, the words surprising him. "For 25 years, she was my best friend, and I threw that away." "Then maybe you should have stayed married to her," Jessica snaps. The comment stings because it's true. Richard realizes he made the biggest mistake of his life, and now it's too late to fix it. He hires a private investigator to find Yelena, telling himself he just wants to know that she's okay. The report arrives 2 weeks later. Yelena is living in a small coastal town 3 hours away, working at a local hospital as a nurse. She finished her degree online and passed her licensing exam. She lives alone in a modest apartment near the beach. The investigator includes photographs of Yelena at work, walking on the beach, shopping at the local market. She looks peaceful, younger somehow. Her hair is longer, and she's wearing clothes that look comfortable rather than expensive. She's made friends with her neighbors and volunteers at the local animal shelter on weekends. Richard stares at the photographs for hours, realizing that Yelena is living the life she always wanted. She's helping people, living simply, and finding joy in small things. She's become the person she was meant to be, and he's partly responsible for that growth. But he also realizes that she's built this new life without him, and she's probably better off that way. The final straw comes when Jessica demands that he buy her a new car, a luxury sports car that costs more than Yelena's entire settlement. When he hesitates, she threatens to leave him. "Fine," Richard says, surprising himself with his calm tone. "Leave." Jessica stares at him, shocked. "You don't mean that." "I do mean it. I'm tired of being married to someone who only loves my money. At least I'm not some pathetic middle-aged woman who can't compete with younger women." Richard feels a surge of anger unlike anything he's experienced. "Don't you dare talk about Yelena that way. She's worth 10 of you." "Then go back to her," Jessica says, grabbing her purse. "See if she wants you now." After Jessica leaves, Richard sits in his empty house and realizes that's exactly what he wants to do. He wants to go back to Yelena, to apologize, to try to rebuild what they had. But he doesn't know if she'll even speak to him, much less forgive him. He starts writing letters that he never sends, practicing speeches that he never gives. He knows he needs to see her, but he's terrified of what she might say.
3 years pass before Richard sees Elena again. He's 56 now, and the years have not been kind to him. His marriage to Jessica lasted only 18 months, ending in another expensive divorce. His businesses still thrive, but he finds no joy in success. He's wealthy, successful, and completely alone. The heart attack comes suddenly, striking him down in his office on a Tuesday afternoon. The paramedics rush him to the hospital, where doctors work frantically to save his life. The damage is severe, and they tell him honestly that his chances are not good. Richard lies in the ICU, connected to machines and monitors, thinking about all the things he never said and all the chances he missed. He thinks about Elena, wondering if she knows he's dying, wondering if she cares. His current girlfriend, a woman named Sarah who's been dating him for 6 months, sits beside his bed reading magazines. She's attractive and kind, but she doesn't really know him. She makes small talk about the weather and the hospital food, but she doesn't understand that he's not afraid of dying. He's afraid of dying alone. "I should call someone," Sarah says, checking her phone. "Your business partner, maybe? Or your lawyer?" "Call Elena," Richard whispers, his voice barely audible. "Who is Elena?" "My wife," he says, then corrects himself. "My ex-wife, Elena Matthews. She's in Cedar Bay." Sarah looks confused. "Why would you want to call your ex-wife?" "Because I love her," Richard says simply. "I've always loved her." Sarah makes the call reluctantly, and to Richard's surprise, Elena agrees to come. She drives 3 hours to reach the hospital, arriving just as visiting hours are ending. The nurses make an exception when they see her quiet dignity and the way Richard's eyes light up when she enters the room. "Elena," he whispers, his voice barely audible. "You came." "Of course I came," she says, pulling a chair close to his bed. "You're still my husband in every way that matters." They sit in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the machines beep and hum around them. Elena holds his hand, and Richard feels more peaceful than he has in years. "I'm sorry," he says finally. "I'm so sorry for everything." "I know," Elena replies. "I forgave you a long time ago." "I was an idiot," he continues, his words coming slowly. "I had everything, and I threw it away." "You had to find your own way," Elena says gently. "We both did." "Are you happy?" he asks. Elena considers this carefully. "I'm at peace," she says. "I'm helping people, living simply, enjoying small things. I'm who I was meant to be."
Without me. Because of you, Elena corrects. Losing you taught me to find myself. Richard closes his eyes, feeling the weight of those words. He caused her pain, but somehow she used that pain to grow stronger. I dreamed about you, he whispers. Every night for 3 years, I dreamed about coming back to you. I dreamed about you too, Elena admits. But in my dreams, you were the man I married, not the man you became. I want to be that man again. Elena leans closer, her voice soft and tender. You are that man, Richard. You always were. You just forgot for a while. The machines around them beep steadily, marking time in a life that's running out. Richard knows he won't leave this hospital, and somehow that's okay. Elena is here, and for the first time in years, he feels complete. I love you, he says, the words carrying the weight of 25 years of marriage and 3 years of regret. I love you too, Elena replies, and Richard can hear in her voice that she means it. She leans down close to his ear, and what she whispers next will be captured by a nurse's phone that was accidentally left recording on the bedside table. The words are simple, but they carry the power of forgiveness and the weight of a love that survived betrayal. Thank you, she whispers, for teaching me that I was stronger than I knew. Richard smiles, his eyes filling with tears. In trying to break her, he had helped her discover her own strength. In losing her, he had found his way back to love. The recording goes viral within hours, shared by millions who remember their story and recognize the power of forgiveness. But Richard never sees his final moment of fame. He dies peacefully that night, holding Elena's hand, finally at peace with the man he used to be.